Hello and welcome back to the Candid Thoughts Podcast. This is your host, Isabella Pasquale. We are at Fogo de Chao in lovely Pasadena. Today's Golden Nugget, Sisyphean cycles. When you're young, eager, and building from scratch, you sometimes take gambles attempting to earn business, offering contingency deals, underbidding contracts that you're chosen by clients, or taking lost leads only to not earn repeat business while they gloat about purchasing from your competitors. Burnout can be incredibly frustrating and a consequence of difficulties. To have expended countless hours and resources into goals, and then life gets in the way. It wasn't until I had faced deliberately positioned obstacles that impeded my own progress that I was able to understand. Several years ago, I was consulting for a client who wanted to mass produce his patent-pending device, but as he was an introverted blue-collar guy, he lacked the ability to schmooze and wasn't very well connected. Enter my precocious and gumptive self, coming from the production and cannabis worlds, which were fitting for my extroversion. I'd amassed a Rolodex of connections. Speaking of gumption, we had met at the Bubba Gump Shrimp in Long Beach, California, with his wife attending. After that initial meeting, I enthusiastically got to work. Per my agreement, I was to receive commissions on the back end once manufacturing began. After months of meetings, CAD reviews, and follow-ups with manufacturers, I'd reconvened at the same Bubblegum Shrimp with the inventor and his wife. Only this time, they were getting a divorce. You can imagine where this was going. Following that meeting, I tried to reignite that passion in my client's heart, even bribing him with the prospect of moving on and envisioning young senoritas on the beach as a reward and new beginning for seeing the project through. My client was exhausted and threw in the towel. With this coup de grace, I canceled the production plans with my manufacturer. Half a year of my labor had been exhausted, and as per my agreement, which was on a contingency basis, I received zero compensation. There was also an instance with an internationally renowned comedian who was debuting a North American tour. I'd underbid myself to an unrealistic, almost free degree that it was ridiculous. I did negotiate travel accommodations to be included. It was no fault of my clients, whom I became friends with. I was the one who optioned the 29-day traveling tour at such a low bid. We filmed a Borat-esque mockumentary parody feature film, which coincided with the actual comedy tour. I'm guilty of repeating this practice with several other celebrity brands, but the benefits of access are invaluable. However, if you're financially hurting, then you can't continue to underbid yourself so deeply that your costs eclipse your margins. Do it enough times, it forms a habit that people will take advantage of, and it's difficult to renegotiate after that precedent has been established, should you continue doing business with them. More recently, I built up a meat wholesale business and put in bids to several restaurants, provided samples, and went back and forth with my suppliers and the clients. These were short-lived, as anyone in the consumer packaged goods or restaurant industries knows that volume is where the margins are. These former clients of mine were asking for a minuscule volume, and I expended more than my margins to make them happy. I operated under the philosophy of taking a loss to gain position, which, as I stated, can grant you otherwise arduous access through gatekeepers and category managers. I had placed bids with a popular poke restaurant franchise to be their supplier of sushi-grade fish. Through another separate deal, I had been introduced to and became friendly with the franchise owner. Out of pocket, I fronted product and his restaurant was carrying my supply. Like many others whom I've helped, they made extra requests that weren't part of the deal. Overextension is extremely expensive and draining. That's the problem with being a kiss-ass, trying to earn bids and prove yourself. You can get exploited. Upon a follow-up a little while later, the franchise owner had advised me that he had found an even cheaper deal. Bidding wars, fighting for little pennies of profit, where margins are incredibly tight, is how the commodities business works. You make your money through volume. Again, this was another costly and time-consuming risk that went unrewarded. It can sometimes seem for many people that their efforts go in vain. Even the decision makers are at an impasse. A broker, salesperson, mediator, opposing party may make concessions just to edge the pieces forward on the board, so to speak. Although purposefully intended, this gesture can lead to exploitation, where the opposite party may make extra requests, baiting a deal. Once the deeds have been done, the realization that the buyer party went another way comes to light. Moral of the story? Be judicious with whom you do favors for. Otherwise, you're being wasteful and burning yourself out. Setbacks and obstacles, be them circumstantial or deliberate, are a reality for the many climbing the ladder. The constant grinding and the starting and stopping cycles may be fruitless. The myth of Sisyphus accounts for the tale of King Sisyphus of Ephyra, who was a cunning escape artist who triumphed over his enemies and the gods' challenges, even going so far as to trick Persephone, wife of Hades, god of the Greek underworld, allowing him to return to the land of the living under certain circumstances. In cheating the gods through his manipulations, he was eventually punished by Hades to an eternity of pushing a boulder endlessly, a scenario which Sisyphus couldn't weasel himself out of. Luckily for us mortals, there is always a way out of our circumstances. It may be painful to cut people off, or even long-term commitments. This is how we escape from our so-called Sisyphean cycles. If there have been deliberate obstacles in your path, be them jealous parties sabotaging deals out of their own insecurities, newly instated government policies that freeze present business, how can one escape these Sisyphean cycles? Eliminate the common denominator. Maybe it's you. In AA, there's a step called taking inventory, which means to take responsibility for your own actions. Are you the problem? Or are you enabling abuse cycles from others by being too nice? Overextending yourself and not having those efforts reciprocated, not respecting your own needs. These are all considerations that are seldom discussed in the hive mind. Personal responsibility. Maybe you need to isolate to collect and reinvent yourself. It may be painful, but this introspection is one of the first steps in escaping being stuck. Not everyone will understand this unique perspective. On different ends of the spectrum, there are those who've always had their way, either by having certain privileges which afforded them people kissing their asses, to those who've manipulated and cheated their ways to success. In the middle, there are those who've naively believed that meritocracy and morals alone would command respect. Outside of public service or the military, your chances are stark. For someone like myself in the middle, who spent an entire lifetime as a black sheep, present but not accepted anywhere, I grew up isolated. Being alone is very dangerous and welcomes manipulation by parties who wish to exploit your labor and intentions for their own means. Having fear of consequence can ground people amongst dangerous parties and keep them safe, but also prohibits them from being congruent and who they truly are. It was only after I had been used and left adrift in many circumstances where people had taken what they needed from me, where I could actually think about what I needed. I had to escape obligations that I had been guilt-tripped into by people who came into my life under the guise of friendship, but showed their fangs and entrapped me. I'm clearly not the first person in history who had been squeezed by clandestine rogues. Having a fresh start can be intimidating for most folks. But for myself, I've been through the ringer many times. Business isn't easy, especially if you're building from scratch without the cushion of generational business or wealth. Even apparent mentors can use and exploit you. Braving the world alone can be hectic. Not everyone is cut out for it. But if you're trapped, the best way to escape a Sisyphean cycle is to cut loose. There's the concept of Sunken Cost Fallacy, which addresses investing effort into something that doesn't yield returns, especially after putting in work for a long time. You can't afford to keep hemorrhaging time, money, and effort. Something to consider in the new year.